welcome to Vantage. Our focus remains on the regime change in Syria. The rebels are slowly consolidating power, but waves of retribution grip the country. Symbols and loyalists of Bashar al-Assad are being targeted. Even his ally Russia is on the run. Satellite images show Russian ships leaving their Syrian naval base. Is Moscow pulling out of the country? If so, what does it mean for Putin's ambitions in West Asia? And he's not alone. Leaders in Europe, Turkey, Israel, the US are all scrambling to secure their interests in Syria. We'll tell you what each side is up to. Also, why is Donald Trump inviting Xi Jinping to his inauguration? Why are American CEOs recruiting bodyguards? Why is FIFA being panned after awarding the 2034 World Cup to Saudi Arabia? Why Elon Musk continues to gather wealth despite his setbacks at X? Why India's wages are stagnant despite booming profits for companies? And what it says about India's inequality problem. Also, how did Erdogan crack a deal between Ethiopia and Somalia? It seems like the Turkish president is everywhere. And if you want inspiration, we've got the perfect story for you tonight, an 88-year-old who rediscovered his love for the piano. First, the headlines. In India, the Union Cabinet clears the One Nation, One Election bill. It is likely to be tabled in the winter session of Parliament. The bill allows simultaneously holding Lok Sabha polls and state assembly elections. One Nation, One Election initiative is high on the agenda of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government. South Korean opposition parties submit a new motion to impeach the president. The 6 parties say they will put the motion to a floor vote on Saturday. Their earlier attempt to impeach the president had failed last week. President Yoon Suk Yeol is under fire for declaring martial law on the 3rd of December. US President Joe Biden commutes the sentences of around 1,500 people and pardons 39 Americans convicted of non-violent crimes. It's the largest single-day act of clemency in modern US history. Biden could also issue preemptive pardons for those who investigated Donald Trump. Romania and Bulgaria will become full-time members of the Schengen area from next year. This would complete the process that started in 2011. Austria had initially opposed this move, but last month, Vienna lifted its veto. Romania and Bulgaria have been members of the European Union since 2007. And India's D. Gukesh wins the World Chess Championship. He beat China's Ding Lijian in a 14-round match in Singapore. At 18 years of age, Gukesh is the youngest chess champion. He is also India's second after Vishwanathan Anand.
إمبراطورية غازية غزت أرض الشام إلا خرجت منها.
Days after the fall of Assad, Syria remains in turmoil. The rebels are trying to seize power and establish control in Damascus. In the rest of the country, chaos reigns. Take a look at these pictures from al-Qardaha. It's a town in northeastern Syria.
طريح الكلب المقبور حافظ أسد الله يحرقه بقبره حارقينه الشباب حرقوه قاموا بالواجب عم دفوه.
That's the tomb of Hafiz al-Assad, the former ruler of Syria and the father of the ousted president Bashar al-Assad, the one who has taken refuge in Syria, Bashar al-Assad. So this is what happened in al-Qardaha. Unidentified men set the tomb of Hafiz al-Assad on fire. This shows the public anger against the old regime in Syria. After the president has been ousted, symbols of his rule are being targeted. It is clear that the Assad era is over. Syrians want a future without this regime. They are calling for retribution. They want a public execution of those who served under Assad. In fact, this week, a rumor swept through Syria that one of the henchmen of Assad will be executed publicly. A massive crowd gathered on the streets of Damascus. They wanted to see the man being hanged. The chaos that followed led to a stampede. The execution, as it turned out, never happened. But such incidents speak volumes about the mood in Syria. The country is a powder keg. One spark could lead to an explosion. The question is, who will restore stability to the country? Who will restore stability to Syria? The rebel forces under HTS believe that they can do it. HTS is the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the group that led the offensive against Bashar al-Assad. It's not clear if they will get a free rein, though, or if a new challenger will emerge. Meanwhile, those who partnered with Assad are trying to cut their losses, like Russia, which backed the previous regime. Moscow now says it is trying to engage with the opposition groups.
You know that we, of course, maintain contacts with those who are currently controlling the situation in Syria. This is necessary because our bases are located there. Our diplomatic mission is located there, and, of course, the issue related to ensuring the security of these facilities is extremely important and of primary significance.
Russia says it is speaking to those who are in charge. It has a lot at stake here. Moscow has military assets in Syria. Take a look at these pictures. This is the Syrian port of Tartus. It sits on the Mediterranean coast. Russia controls this port. Until the 5th of December, Russian ships were still there, but now they aren't. Reports say Russian ships left this port last week. It is not clear if this is a temporary move or if Russia has left Tartus for good. But if Moscow loses this base permanently, it is going to be a huge setback because Tartus is Russia's only overseas military base. It has immense strategic significance. The base served two purposes. One was to project power in the Mediterranean, and the second was to monitor NATO forces in the region. So why did Moscow pull back its ships? It is probably trying to see how things pan out. Russian officials say they want to engage with Syria's new leaders and discuss the future of their deployments. Moscow will have to tread carefully because this isn't just about saving one naval base. Russia's military footprint in Syria is much wider than this. It includes around 7,500 troops and 2 military bases. So will Moscow get to keep them? The Kremlin says it is, and I'm quoting, premature to speculate at this point, but the signs don't look good. Consider what Abu Mohammed al-Julani said this week. He's the leader of the HTS, and he doesn't see countries like Russia as allies.
My brothers, much was prepared for the battle, and thank God, he was gracious to us. We were weaker than the enemy, but the weapon we fought with was locally manufactured. We exerted great effort to acquire this weapon, and even the money came from our efforts. There was no country to support us.
Clearly, Jalani wants to forge his own path. He's making a calculated bid for power. Part of this involves reshaping his image. He's trying to distance himself from the al-Qaeda, the group that he split from. He's been part of the al-Qaeda and ISIS. He's presenting himself as a moderate leader. He wants to be seen as a champion of pluralism and tolerance. But the world is watching his moves, and some of what he's doing does not inspire confidence. Look at what his team has been up to. While the government remains in lockdown, they are busy changing the uniforms of police officers. State workers are yet to return to work. There are disruptions at airports and borders. These workers are worried about what's in store for them, and with good reason. You see, the rebels are launching a sweeping crackdown on officials from the Assad regime. Al-Julani says his forces will target government officials who tortured Syrian people. And those who inform on these officials will be rewarded. And that is the big worry. Will revenge and retribution derail the process of rebuilding a country in ruins? The US has sent a message to the HTS asking them to establish an inclusive and transitional government, one that represents all sections of society. Syria's opposition parties have their own vision of what their future should look like. Like the Syrian National Coalition, it is the main coalition of opposition groups in the country. It wants an election to be held after 18 months. Clearly, there are too many cooks in this kitchen, each with their own plan. What Syria needs is a clear leadership that stems from consensus that can heal and restore the country. If not, this chaos could become the breeding ground for more strife. Syria's future will be decided by the rebels, but they will need outside help, whether it's in the form of aid or investments or security guarantees. The problem is, again, there is no consensus. Each power has a different priority in Syria. Some want to demilitarize it, some want to democratize it, and others are scared of an ISIS resurgence. So tonight we're looking at the scramble for Syria. What are regional and world powers doing there? Let's start with Turkey. They are hosting more than 3 million Syrian refugees. A lot of them have amassed at the border. Experts say at least half of them will return to Syria. And most families have the same plan. Send the young men first, see how the situation is, and then the whole family can follow. Local governments in Turkey have also jumped in. Some mayors are offering one-way tickets to refugees. That's transport plus relocation costs. So Ankara's first objective is to get the refugees back home. But they also have a military objective, to weaken Kurdish groups. You see, Turkey is home to a restive Kurdish minority. President Erdogan calls them terrorists. Syria also has Kurdish groups, and they're backed by the United States. Erdogan is using this transition period to weaken the Kurds. He's launched multiple strikes on Kurdish targets. Another country is using the same strategy, and that is Israel. Instead of the Kurds, Israel is destroying assets of the ousted Assad regime. All sorts of military sites have been hit by the Israelis. Prime Minister Netanyahu has also reached out to the rebels. He says he is willing to engage on one condition, that the rebels do not help Iran. And rounding off the region are Arab countries. Most of them are in a pickle. They have welcomed the change in regime. They've also demanded the protection of Syria's sovereignty and territory. But deep inside, the Arabs will be worried. The Syrian rebellion grew out of the Arab Spring, out of Islamic political movements. The Gulf monarchies do not like that. They see such movements as a threat to their power. For example, the UAE is apparently livid. They were caught off guard by the rebel offensive. They also disapprove of America's pivot. You see, the US once considered the new rebel leaders to be terrorists. I'm talking about the HTS. The Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Americans call them terrorists, but now Washington is reaching out to them, which is why the Gulf Arab states are nervous. They don't have a part to play yet, so they're watching from the sidelines. Now we come to the global players. Like I said, the US is reaching out to the Syrian rebels. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is traveling to Turkey tomorrow, so the US strategy is quite clear. Use Ankara as a bridge to the new regime. Beyond that, Washington is also concerned about the ISIS.
First and foremost, of course, is protecting our forces that remain there. Second is making sure, to the best of our ability, that ISIS does not reconstitute. Through the Obama administration, then the Trump administration, we were successful in eliminating the territorial caliphate that ISIS had developed in Syria. We don't want to see that revive.
Thousands of ISIS fighters are in Kurdish prisons. The US will want to keep them there. Washington also has a military base in southern Syria. It houses around 900 soldiers. The US will be keen to retain that influence. But to do that, they will need the Kurds. If the Kurds have a say in the future government in Damascus, the US can retain its foothold. If not, Washington may face pushbacks. Look at the situation in Iraq. The US has more than 2,000 soldiers there in Iraq. But the Iraq government does not like it. They have been trying to expel the American soldiers. Then we have the Europeans. Honestly, it's not a good time for Europe. Brussels is more focused on the war in Ukraine. They're bracing for the Donald Trump effect. So West Asia is not high on their priority list. Nonetheless, we've seen some moves. Germany is hosting around 1 million Syrian refugees, but Berlin is not rushing to send them back. Their foreign minister wants to coordinate with the United Nations to see if things are stable in Syria. She has also announced more aid for the country, around $8.4 million.
The situation is so unclear that it's currently impossible to judge whether there will be another flow of refugees from that region or whether a return to Syria is actually possible. In order to ensure further assistance for the people in spite of the difficult security situation, we will provide an additional €8 million in humanitarian aid.
Now, most of Europe is facing the same question. They're hosting tens of thousands of Syrian refugees. Should they be sent back or not? That is the question. Some European politicians are very eager to do this. They say charter planes and return them to Syria. We haven't seen European governments doing that yet, but they have paused asylum requests. Even this year, more than 100,000 Syrians applied for asylum. Those applications were paused after Assad's ouster. So Europe's policy is to wait and watch. And finally, you have China. They did not militarily support Assad, like Russia or Iran, but diplomatically they did. Last year, China hosted Assad during the Asian Games. They also increased financial assistance. China pumped around $3 billion into Syria's oil and gas industry. Assad also signed up for the Belt and Road Initiative back in 2022. So Beijing's plan was to cash in on Syria's reconstruction. They bet on Assad to prevail in this war. And after his ouster, they haven't said much. China's foreign ministry called for stability and peace. They also demanded a political process. Like I said, each player has their own interest in Syria. And they're not sitting idly. They are using force to secure those interests. If they're not careful, the results could be disastrous. The US versus China, Donald Trump versus Xi Jinping. A battle is on the horizon, a fight for trade dominance. You know about the opening moves. We've told you about how Trump is planning to impose tariffs. Tariffs on Chinese goods. They may start at 10% and go as high as 60%, maybe even higher if Donald Trump deems it necessary. Xi Jinping has been planning his defense strategy. Yesterday we talked about China stopping mineral exports, how Beijing plans to weaponize export controls and use this as a bargaining chip. Now, amid all of this talk of trade war, a new report has come out, one that seemingly goes against this narrative. Donald Trump has apparently invited Xi Jinping to his inauguration. Trump will be sworn in on the 20th of January. There are about 40 days to go. And he seems to want Xi Jinping as a guest for this event. Trump reportedly invited Xi in early November. They spoke shortly after Trump won the election, and it seems that is when Xi Jinping was invited. Now, this is quite unusual for a number of reasons. Traditionally, a US presidential inauguration is a domestic affair. Americans gather to watch their new leader being sworn in. You have the supporters, you have government officials, and living former presidents in attendance. You don't see foreign leaders in such inaugurations. At most, you'll have the ambassadors of foreign nations in the crowd. That's it. That is the tradition, and it has been this way since 1874. That's as far back as the records go. 150 years. But it seems Donald Trump plans to break this tradition. And don't get me wrong, Trump doesn't seem to be doing this exclusively for Xi Jinping. It seems Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban has been invited as well. Reports say that Orban is considering flying down. And don't be surprised if that happens. Trump and Orban share close ties. Orban was in the US to meet Trump just this week. So he could easily fly over again in January. A lot of other leaders could. But these are mostly Trump's friends. Xi Jinping is a different case altogether. Trump and Xi look set to begin a harrowing trade war, a conflict that could reshape global supply lines. It was a major pitch during Donald Trump's presidential campaign, and we know that Xi Jinping is taking it seriously. So then why is Trump calling him? Perhaps it's the old adage, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Or it could just be an act of courtesy, like opposing teams shaking hands before a cricket or football match. It doesn't mean the trade war has been called off. And whether Xi accepts this invite is another matter altogether. Xi Jinping has been invited to inaugurations in the past. He has always declined to go personally. Instead, he sends special envoys. And that makes it even more unlikely. In this case, also there are just 40 days left. It takes time to organize a Chinese presidential trip to the US. There is protocol. Security arrangements need to be made. It's not something that can happen off the cuff. So it is highly unlikely that Xi Jinping will attend Donald Trump's inauguration. And that also highlights another point. Like we said, Trump may have invited him back in November. And we've seen the development since then. Nothing has changed. The dynamics have not changed. Both sides have made statements about tariffs since then. China continues to try and build its defense. So clearly, the inauguration in white won't stop the impending trade war. Now let's shift our attention to Afghanistan. The Islamic State has struck a major blow to the Taliban. They took out Khalil Haqqani. He was the refugee minister of the Taliban. Khalil Haqqani was targeted by a suicide bomber just as he was about to leave his office. And this man was a key figure in the Taliban government. He was the uncle of Sirajuddin Haqqani, the interior minister of Kabul. The Taliban took power in Kabul in 2021, and since then they have waged a war against ISIS-K, the Islamic State Khorasan. ISIS-K, it is the local branch of the Islamic State, and this attack was a message to the Taliban. It shows how the ISIS still remains a serious threat to their rule in Afghanistan.
It was a daring and brutal strike. As Khalil Haqqani was leaving his office, the suicide bomber struck. The blast killed 7 people, including Haqqani himself. This attack strikes at the core of the Taliban's government, and it came from a long-standing enemy, the Islamic State Khorasan. Since 2021, when the Taliban returned to power, ISIS-K has been challenging their rule. Suicide bombings have been their go-to tool. Yesterday's attack may be the Taliban's biggest setback yet. Khalil Haqqani was part of the Haqqani network. It's a powerful faction of the Taliban. He was also designated a global terrorist by the United States. But to his peers, Haqqani was more than just a leader. He was an elder statesman and a war hero, one who was working to rehabilitate refugees returning to Afghanistan from countries like Pakistan and Iran. He was also the uncle of Sirajuddin Haqqani, the Taliban's acting interior minister. The strike is a blow for Afghanistan's new rulers. It couldn't have come at a worse time. There are whispers of internal strife within the Taliban. These tensions stem from some recent decisions. The Taliban's supreme leader, Habibatullah Akhundzada, has made deeply unpopular moves. Recently, he banned women from attending medical colleges, including nursing schools. Leaders like Sirajuddin Haqqani have opposed such restrictions. The Interior Minister has pushed for a more pragmatic approach. He has argued for allowing girls to attend school beyond the 6th grade. He has also advocated for women to return to work in government offices. His uncle's death will further inflame these internal tensions. Since 2021, they have strengthened their grip on power, but groups like the ISIS-K have still managed to mount fresh attacks. Every year, Afghanistan witnesses dozens of bombings and suicide attacks. ISIS-K has been behind several of them, and they constantly target Taliban officials. The ISIS-K is trying to undermine their rule. That's why the strike on Khalil Haqqani is a major victory for them. The attack yesterday threatens more than the Taliban's control. It challenges their unity. It highlights the growing difficulties in maintaining their leadership. While ISIS-K poses the greatest danger, other threats also persist. The National Resistance Front is one such rival. This anti-Taliban faction includes former members of Afghanistan's deposed government. As of today, the Taliban is still stronger and has more resources, but they're starting to look vulnerable.
It was a quiet Wednesday morning in New York. Brian Thompson was on his way to a conference. He was the CEO of United Healthcare. It was just another day for him. It turned out to be his last. He was gunned down outside a Manhattan hotel. The suspect is a 26-year-old man named Luigi Mangione. Bullet casings left at the scene bore cryptic messages: deny, defend, depose. That's what they said. Deny, defend, depose. The symbolism was as chilling as the act itself. We told you about the suspect yesterday, how he's become a bit of a hero, inspiring merchandise on Amazon. And while killing someone cannot be the solution, this case also shows the widespread anger against the healthcare industry in the US. And this realization has triggered widespread panic. Corporate America is nervous. CEOs are on high alert. Healthcare may be the target now, but others worry if they would be next.
There may be some liability back on his company. The fact that they knew he was getting threats, was it known to them? And did the board not then provide security at an event that was known.
Brian Thompson had received threats before, multiple times according to his wife, but he did not have a security detail. He was walking alone to the hotel, and that's because corporate security is often a touchy issue. CEOs may be assigned bodyguards in some cases, but they see them as a hassle. Many even look at it as an unnecessary expense. Some others are said to have a false sense of security. They believe that their company is too small or that basic protections are sufficient. Brian Thompson could have had any of these reasons to not have a security detail, but the killing has raised questions. Are corporate leaders safe? And if not, what are they and their companies doing about it? In the wake of this killing, they're re-evaluating their security measures. Some are hiring personal bodyguards. Others are getting company-mandated security details. And this, of course, is boosting the business of US security firms. They're reporting an unprecedented demand. One firm received 70 requests from concerned companies within 36 hours, 70 requests. So that's one aspect that companies are looking at, physical security. Another thing CEOs are increasingly wary of is their digital footprint, where they are, where they live, where they go, who they're meeting. Companies are scrubbing this information off their websites. And not just that, some companies are also removing the pictures and bios of their executives altogether. Take United Healthcare, for example. They used to have an About Us page, which included details of Brian Thompson. Now it just talks about the company. Same for CVS. It has removed the bios of executives from the website. So both companies and CEOs are genuinely spooked, it seems. They're taking their security seriously, which brings us to the question, how much does it cost to really protect a CEO? You can say it's not cheap. Full-time executive protection can cost up to $250,000 annually. $250,000 a year. And it's not just about the top executive anymore. Division leaders, board members, they're all being seen as potential targets.
I think you're going to see a lot more threats out there. Threats are, again, to scare people in the industry that you're mad at. Now they can reference this. The threat can come in. You saw what happened to him in New York. I'm going to do that to you. And the companies now have to, one, it's going to scare the executives more. And the companies now have to look at spending money for security. So I think those threats are going to increase.
So security is definitely priority number one now. But this shooting has spurred another trend as well. Some leaders are rejecting the corner office altogether. They no longer want to be the CEO, especially in polarizing industries like healthcare or insurance. While Thompson's death is a watershed moment, this is not an isolated incident. This is not the first such incident over the last decade. Threats to CEOs have been rising. And this is fueled by societal divides and digital accessibility. So many are said to be rejecting the top job. They say they already have lucrative careers. They don't think the tag is worth the risk. But is all of this just a knee-jerk reaction to a shooting, or will this heightened awareness last? Security experts warn that America has a short memory. The current panic might fade soon, until, God forbid, the next such case happens. We have a host for the 2034 FIFA World Cup, and it's a controversial one. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It was announced by the football chief in Switzerland yesterday. Almost immediately, the criticism began. As you know, Saudi Arabia is not a democracy. It has restrictive laws for women and LGBTQ communities. So rights groups are up in arms. They say Saudi Arabia is sports washing its atrocities. And it's not a new criticism. We saw the same outrage leading up to the 2022 FIFA World Cup, the one that was hosted by Qatar, another Gulf monarchy with a poor rights record. But fans praised the tournament in Qatar. It produced one of the best World Cups in recent history. So how do we see Saudi Arabia's winning bid? Is it indeed sports washing, or is it a chance to take football to a wider audience? Our next report tells you.
It is a great pleasure that I can confirm.
And cue the celebrations. Fireworks lit up the night sky in Riyadh. Down below, hundreds of fans screamed in joy. This was the moment Saudi Arabia had been waiting for, their chance to host the FIFA World Cup. For Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, this is his biggest prize yet. He's been dreaming of turning his kingdom into a sporting capital. But rights groups are not thrilled. They say it's sports washing, meaning sports is being used to launder the kingdom's poor human rights record. Whether it's restrictive laws for women, or the ban on homosexuality, or the general lack of civil liberties. This year, Riyadh has executed more than 300 people, out of which 100 are foreigners. Critics say FIFA is rewarding such atrocities. Both Saudi Arabia and FIFA have addressed this. The kingdom says everyone is welcome to experience Saudi hospitality. And FIFA says football is a catalyst. It can move the needle in the right direction.
Social improvements, positive human rights impacts. That is one of the responsibilities of hosting a World Cup.
It's open to everyone. I invite everyone to come to Saudi Arabia. They will see something that they have never seen before, and they will experience something that they have never experienced anywhere else, which is the Saudi hospitality.
But critics are not convinced. They're calling it a reckless decision that will put many lives at risk, and they've got a point. Hosting a World Cup requires building stadiums. Riyadh is hoping to have 15 of them, but 8 are yet to be built. Most of the kingdom's labour comes from South Asia, and the regulations are very weak, quite similar to Qatar, which hosted the 2022 World Cup. Qatar admitted that 400 to 500 migrant workers died as a result of the construction work, but experts believe the toll is much higher. They recorded more than 6,500 migrant worker deaths since 2010. That's when Qatar won the bid. If it happened in Qatar, chances are it will happen in Saudi Arabia too. But there's another side to this debate. Qatar delivered one of the most exciting World Cups in history. It was accessible to fans in Asia and Africa. It also passed without security issues, very different from the rowdy scenes often associated with British or European football events. This isn't a debate that will be settled soon, but Saudi Arabia has 10 years to prove the critics wrong, to host a successful and inclusive World Cup. The kingdom has never had a problem opening its purse strings, but this time they'll also have to open their minds a bit as well.
The world's richest man just got richer. I'm talking about Elon Musk. His net worth has reached $400 billion. $400 billion. That's more than the GDP of 150 countries. Imagine that. One man is richer than 150 countries. So what led to this wealth boost for Elon Musk? Well, it is Donald Trump's win. Since November 5th, Elon Musk has added $136 billion to his net worth. How long will this surge continue? And will Musk become the world's first trillionaire before 2027? Our next report tells you.
$400 billion. It's more than the GDP of about 150 nations. With that much money, you can build 3 international space stations, or construct 40 megacities, or host the Olympic Games 80 times, or make 40 Marvel movies, or even buy every Rolex ever produced. It's a lot of options for Elon Musk, whose net worth has now surpassed $400 billion. It's currently at $447 billion. This is a historic first for even the world's richest man. No one has ever surpassed it, the 400 billion mark. Elon Musk has 6 companies, including Tesla, SpaceX, X, Neuralink, and others. But this wealth surge came from only one: SpaceX. The company and its investors agreed to buy as many as $1.25 billion of insider shares. This led to an increase in the company's valuation. In turn, that led to a rise in Musk's net worth, almost by $50 billion. This pushed Musk's net worth to over the 400 mark. But while this may be the latest reason, Musk's net worth has been surging for some time now, especially since November 5th. In the US elections, Elon Musk bet on Donald Trump. He endorsed him. He donated millions. Trump won the White House in the end, And now Elon Musk is reaping the benefits. His net worth has surged by $136 billion since November 5th, a gain of 77% since Trump's victory. SpaceX is now the world's most valuable private startup with a $350 billion valuation. On Wednesday, Tesla shares closed at a record high. Since election day, the EV maker's stock has rallied by roughly 65%. Musk's artificial intelligence startup, xAI, has doubled in value, and this is just in the month of November. So it's been quite the windfall for Elon Musk, and it has left his fellow billionaires far behind. Take Jeff Bezos, for example. His net worth is almost $140 billion less than that of Musk. At this rate, Musk is on track to becoming the world's first trillionaire. Right now, his wealth is growing at an annual rate of 110%. If that continues, he will be a trillionaire by the year 2027. Now, none of this is new for Elon Musk. He has always been a man of firsts. The first to make space travel seem within reach. The first to turn electric cars into a mainstream reality. The first to shatter the $400 billion net worth mark. And now, the first person who could become a trillionaire. So, as Elon Musk pushes the limits of wealth accumulation, the world watches with mixed emotions. Some see him as a visionary, leveraging his fortune to drive innovation and redefine human potential. Others question the growing wealth gap and the power concentrated in the hands of one man. But one thing is certain, Elon Musk isn't slowing down. His journey to become the world's first trillionaire will be nothing short of historic, and perhaps controversial. The question now isn't if Elon Musk can reach $1 trillion, it's what he'll do when he gets there.
Last month, the Indian economy got a rude shock. After months of rapid growth, the GDP numbers disappointed. Growth was just 5.4%, far less than the projected 7%. So naturally, questions were asked. If the fundamentals look good, why did the GDP fall? India's chief economic advisor may have an answer. Listen to what he said last week.
The truth is the corporate sector has never had it so good as in the last 4 years despite the challenging environment. However, compensation to employees has become weaker. Corporates have used profits to deleverage.
In other words, Indian companies are doing really well, but the workers are not getting their fair share. Just look at these numbers. Corporate profits quadrupled from 2019 to 2023. Basically, profits have increased by 300%. Now look at the wages. In engineering and manufacturing fields, wages increased by 0.8%. In the financial sector by 2.8%. In logistics by 4.2%, and in consumer goods by 5.4%. I know these numbers look bad, but they look even worse if you account for inflation. Inflation in India has been around 5 to 6% for the last 4 years. So the real wage growth is zero, perhaps even negative in some sectors. During the same time, companies have done very well. Their profits make up 4.8% of India's GDP. And that's the highest level since 2008. Yet the people who work in those companies are not benefiting. Their salaries remain stagnant. And this could be dragging down India's growth. I'll explain how. Private final consumption is the biggest contributor to India's GDP. Private final consumption is just a fancy word for consumer spending, what you and I spend on everyday things, like food or clothes or transport. That spending made up 58% of India's GDP in 2022. But last year, its share fell to 55%, which is not a good sign. We need people to consume more things, to spend more on goods and services. Only then will economic activity expand and the GDP grow. But for us to spend, wages must also increase. Stagnant wages will not spur a rise in spending, and the government knows this. The problem was first highlighted in this year's economic survey. It's a document that precedes the budget. It said that wages are not keeping up with rising profits. It also urged Indian companies to correct this. At that time, our GDP growth was robust. So this suggestion slipped under the radar. But now the government is concerned. It feels that weak income is the main reason for falling consumption. So what can be done about it? Unfortunately, not very much. You cannot order companies to give better hikes. Plus, most of these companies already have excuses ready. They say workers need to upskill themselves, or that artificial intelligence is taking over, or that the gig economy is rising. And all of these are true to some extent, but it doesn't justify such a massive gap in profits and wages. Clearly, there is a problem of inequitable growth. Let me show you another report. It says that India's inequality is at a 100-year high. The top 1% earn 22% of India's national income. The bottom 50% earn just 15%, 15. India's billionaire count has doubled in the last decade. Their collective wealth rose 42% this year. This is not a bad trend per se, to have more rich people. But wealth creation leads to more jobs. It also leads to trickling down of benefits. That is the assumption. But as the wage data shows, it's not happened yet. Indian consumers are not spending more, and according to some indicators, they are in distress. This report says that India's gold loans are rising. They are 50% up in the last 7 months. One reason for this could be the rising gold prices. Higher the price, higher the loan amount. But in India, gold goes beyond numbers. It's an emotional asset. Selling or pledging gold is often a distress move in India. You do it when you are pressed for money. I guess all of this points to the same worrying trend that India's middle class is struggling. The good news is that the government knows that there is a problem. Hence the nudge by the chief economic advisor. Let's see if a policy change or intervention follows. Ethiopia and Somalia. The two nations began feuding in January. Ethiopia approached a breakaway region of Somalia for port access, the region of Somaliland. It reportedly promised to recognize Somaliland's independence in exchange for maritime trade access. This caused an uproar in Somalia, which saw this as an attack on its sovereignty. So ties between Somalia and Ethiopia hit a record low after this. But yesterday there was a détente. The two countries have struck a deal to ease tensions. They've agreed to find a peaceful resolution to this issue. And one nation helped bring this deal about: Turkey.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan was celebrating yesterday. The Turkish president just pulled off a diplomatic coup. He brought together two bickering sides and mediated an agreement to ease tensions.
As a result of the trust that Somalia and Ethiopia have in our country, we have reached a new stage in the Ankara process that we started approximately 8 months ago. By overcoming resentments and misunderstandings, we have taken the first step towards a new beginning based on peace and cooperation between Somalia and Ethiopia.
So, what were these problems that Erdogan was talking about? Ethiopia is a landlocked nation with over 130 million people. It's the largest landlocked nation in the world. But as you can see from the map, the coast isn't very far away. Most neighboring countries have maritime access to the Arabian Sea or the Red Sea. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has wanted maritime access for years, unfettered access. So on the 1st of January this year, he struck a port access deal with Somaliland. Now, Somaliland isn't a recognized country. The world considers it a breakaway region of Somalia. But Ahmed struck a deal to lease the Berbera port in Somaliland. In exchange, Somaliland said he offered them recognition. This sparked a major row. Somalia was livid. They saw it as an attack on their sovereignty. Somalia turned to an old friend for help: Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. In July, Turkey signed a deal with Somalia. It started deploying ships to Somalian waters and troops on the ground. It was a clear pressure tactic to get Ethiopia to back away from the Somaliland port deal. Talks were launched simultaneously. They were called the Ankara process, and for a while they looked to be headed nowhere. The first two rounds didn't solve the problem. A third round, initially scheduled for September, was delayed. Negotiations seemed to be at an impasse, and Ethiopia was steadily making its port dreams a reality. In fact, there was a major breakthrough on Tuesday. Somaliland launched an Ethiopian clearinghouse at Berbera port. Ethiopia was on the verge of starting trade operations, but then yesterday, Turkey convened the meeting in Ankara. Erdogan first met the leaders of Somalia and Ethiopia separately, and then they held a joint press conference.
In one aspect, it's a conclusion because it stops on the differences that we had in the recent times. Ethiopia and Somalia are two neighborly countries, and they have mutual interests in cooperating together and building a prosperous future of both our two countries and our two people.
I believe that today's constructive discussions will push us into a new year with this spirit of cooperation, friendship, and the willingness to work together instead of against each other.
Somalia and Ethiopia have agreed to work together. Ethiopia will get sea access through Somalia. They've agreed to begin technical negotiations by the end of February and conclude the talks 4 months after that. All this will be overseen by Turkey. This is a major win for Erdogan. It's a relief for Somalia, and it gives Ethiopia what it wanted: sea access. The only loser seems to be Somaliland. The region has lost a golden opportunity for international recognition, and it may just be stuck with a new clearinghouse that will only gather dust.
We love greatness, achievement, success, and we usually expect it from our young. We lap up tales of the young or even the youngish achieving anything. We say things like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But time and again, people prove us wrong, and how. Let me tell you about Ray Everley. He's a retired reverend who lives in the UK. He grew up with music. He took up piano as a child, and he was quite good at it. At the age of 21, he passed the grade 7 piano exam. But eventually, life got in the way of piano playing. That is, until last year, when Everley's daughter gave him a Christmas gift, a preparation book for the grade 8 piano exam. This is the highest level beneath a diploma. The gift was supposed to be a fun joke, but it rekindled an old flame. Everley started playing again. He took lessons. He did the hard work, learnt new piano skills, and 67 years after reaching grade 7, at the age of 88, tinkling the 88 piano keys, Everley has passed his grade 8 piano exam. That too with distinction, which makes him one of a tiny percentage of people. This is no mean feat, and it shows the amazing fertility of the human mind, not just Everley's, but anyone's who chooses to explore it. Yes, the adult brain is grizzled. It cannot absorb information as well as a child's impressionable mind because mental processing speed gets slower as we age. So we assume that we cannot pick up new things or complex skills or do something meaningful as we grow older, let alone at the age of 88. Even great thinkers have shared this opinion. Einstein developed his special theory of relativity at the age of 26. He said a person who has not made his great contribution to science before the age of 30 will never do so. That is a big claim from a man of science, but science itself vehemently disagrees with it. Research says that scientists can do their best work at any stage of their career, at any age, and this applies to most things in life. Studies prove that you may face extra difficulties at age 40 or 50 or 90, but the brain will never stop learning. It can master new skills, whatever your age. It may take more effort, but this is more than repaid. Because lifelong learning is the secret to happiness, especially in old age. It lowers the risk of diseases, including dementia, heart disease, stroke, even cancer. Learning improves well-being. It gives people a sense of purpose, which adds years to life. Basically, the benefits are plenty, and people rarely ever regret learning something. Sure, research paints a rosy picture, but the journey is not always easy, we have to say this. Very few of us like being an adult beginner. It implies that you're learning something you should have done as a child. It is slightly patronizing. So we want to get over the beginner stage as quickly as possible. But research proves that a beginner mindset is crucial to learning something at any stage and at any age. It gives us the spirit of a novice, the childlike curiosity, the acceptance of failure, and the motivation to want something badly. We dare claim that a beginner's mindset is all you need to achieve something. But without it, it will be hard to go anywhere fast. So if you're in your 20s or 50s or 70s, let me ask you this. What is it that you've always wanted to do? Do you feel like it's too late to do it now? Overwhelming research shows that it really isn't. Sure, it may be tougher to learn something new today than it was a few years ago, but it is never too late. Learn to keep learning. Try it, and the payoff may surprise you. Yesterday wasn't a good day for big tech. Two major platforms experienced outages. First was Meta, the company that runs WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook. The second was ChatGPT. I can't think of a worse day for Gen Z. No Meta means no reels and no memes. No ChatGPT means no homework and no essays. So congratulations to those teens who survived that turbulent Wednesday. Of course, the saving grace was X/Twitter, still standing amid the rubble of social media outages, which is frankly surprising. You would think an internet bug would affect the anti-vax platform first, or maybe it was too toxic even for a virus. Either way, enjoy the outage meltdown. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Hundreds of Syrians rushed to get ice cream after Assad's fall at an iconic 100-year-old shop in Damascus. Tesla's Optimus humanoid robot can now navigate hills with its new neural tech power. And in China, trees seem to be getting a new wardrobe for winter. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1963, Kenya obtained independence from Britain. Britain invaded Eastern Africa towards the end of the 19th century. They would colonize the land, including Kenya, for more than half a century. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.